All right.
The cards are against us on the spell table.
Well, welcome back to the Universe podcast. This is co-creator and writer Dan Evans. Very frustrated with technology. I work in IT, and technology still sucks. We couldn't get anything rolling. And with me today is
Josh Adams, also co-creator of the Godfo Univice.
he's like I too like to live
Excited.
dangerously.
I'm something of an idiot myself.
I'm something of a moron myself. Um, well, we finally got the tech working, so now we can record. I got to make sure it's recording. So, yeah, it's recording. Okay, cool. Today, the other day, Josh sent me a link to like the new Gargoyles toy line that they just released, which is NECA. Was it NECA? Is that how you say it? NECA.
Nika, I think.
NECA,
That's
and
how I've heard people say it.
but they put
And which,
out
by the way, all the entire line of toys that they've done with Ninja Turtles and Gargoyles have been so stinking cool.
Yeah, you sent me the Steel Clan from Gargoyles, which is the mechanical gargoyles that Xanados made, and it reignited my passion to go back and rewatch Gargoyles, so I did, and I'm almost through the first season, and man, even though I've watched that recently, like in the past 10 years, of course I grew up with it, like, that show was fantastic.
Yeah,
Like, it
yeah.
surprised me again.
It's one of those shows that you clearly they had more budget than a lot of like Saturday morning cartoon shows had. I guess because it was Disney.
Mm-hmm.
The animation is just really good. It doesn't recycle a lot of animation the way a lot of shows back then did. So like it looks great. It also has an incredible cast. Like the voice cast, a lot of them are from Star Trek Next Generation,
Which is
and
crazy.
it's like yeah, it's wild, but like they're really well trained actors, and you got people like Keith David on that show. Who, I mean, is an incredible voice. The voice of Spawn from that
Mm-hmm.
Spawn animated
He's the
series as
drug
well.
he's the drug dealer from Requiem for a Dream.
Yeah, he's been in The Thing and They Live and so many like classic cult B movies. But like just an incredible cast. That show, just on the merits of like its production,
Mm-hmm.
it was such a great show, and it was such a unique feeling idea.
Well,
Like
that's
it
yeah,
did urban fantasy before urban fantasy
and
was a
better.
famous and popular thing.
That's what
Yeah, it's
that's the kind
better
of
than
stuff I want to get into, like point
Dresden.
by point. Is and the only reason because I texted you about this is we've talked this kind of idea before, like in other podcasts, but I really wanted to hit on it. Um,
Hmm.
Stuff like Batman the Animated Series and Gargoyles, particularly Gargoyles, were so original and so
Hmm.
good. And the reason they were so good is because at their heart they didn't treat kids like they were stupid.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
and the reason I'm stating this because we had GI Joe, you had He Man, you had Thundercats, which were great, all great shows. But it was something about the Batman the Animated Series and Gargoyles because they were darker.
Hmm.
Um, they really I mean, gosh, the episode I watched, of course, it was like a anti-gun thing for kids, which is great. But it was like the bigger gargoyle, I forgot his name. Broadway accidentally shot Eliza
Hmm.
with her own gun, and I was like,
Oh wow, I remember that
yeah,
one. Yeah.
I couldn't believe they showed a gun going off in a kids show. I couldn't believe they showed someone getting shot and they showed blood and showed like her whole family came in and they prayed for her and all this stuff, and I was like, and that was like in the first 10 minutes of the episode, and there's just so much in it
Hmm.
that you don't see anymore. But unless you were there, it was just a strange time because Batman, of course, was an established character, but Batman the Animated Series, it almost did as much for the character as like The Dark Knight Returns did.
I would even argue. I would argue that it did more even in the long term because the versions, particularly of the villains in the Rogue Gallery and all, so many of
Mm-hmm.
those villains either got completely reimagined by the animated series, or even had characters like Harley Quinn who were invented in
Yep.
that series. I would say that like the Arkham games,
Mm-hmm.
and the having Mark Hamill voice the Joker, the way they did Mister Freeze, even the take that they did on Catwoman and Two Face, like so much of that show is so iconic that the comics had to bend to the will of that show instead
And
of the other way around,
and
which
Bruce
and
Timm's art style had a lot to do with that.
it did,
Mm-hmm.
it did.
Well,
But it's an incredible thing.
the thing that was great about those two shows, and of course, is and I don't want to go off on a whole tangent because I'll spend 2 hours talking about it. Let's right now stick with Batman animated series and particularly Gargoyles. And the only reason I'm hitting on Gargoyles is because it was an original idea, which is already insane for
Right.
Disney to have picked up at the time. And one guy like came up with it and wrote most of the episodes. Um,
Well, and if you think about it too, like gargoyles as a concept,
mm-hmm.
it's like you don't really think back and say, oh, that's a huge piece of pop culture lore, because it's not like dragons are
Yeah,
or wizards. Like it's not
it's not
something that
overdone.
has yeah, it's something that's been very, very sparsely done. Like I remember there was in the 70s they had a made for TV horror movie called Gargoyles, that the gargoyles came to life and attacked people, and it was cheesy.
Yeah.
um and I cannot remember right off the bat. I don't remember if the Gargoyles TV show was before or after the Hunchback of Notre Dame movie
I think it
that
was
Disney did.
before. I think it was before.
I,
I
I
could be
feel like it
wrong.
was before too. Gargoyles as a concept were just like a piece of forgotten architecture
Mm-hmm.
from like the Gothic period. That was something that you didn't see.
Mm-hmm.
And even the idea of the gargoyles coming to life was something that it's ubiquitous with them now, but at the time, I remember most people that wouldn't have thought, oh, that's what I associate with gargoyles. You just associated them with cathedrals.
Yeah, it's such a brilliant idea that they come to life at night, and wherever they are, no matter what, when the sun hits them, they turn into stone.
Yeah, wherever
Great
they're
idea.
at, they become statues.
Yeah, great
And
idea.
it was like you said, it was so original and so different. Not just like
Mm-hmm.
anybody else would have told that story in a medieval setting.
Mm-hmm.
And that series began in that medieval setting, and within 5 minutes had merged it into the modern world, which was brilliant because that urban fantasy that's everywhere now, and it's a genre that's oversaturated
And
now,
terrible.
and generally not very well written or very well executed. The Dresden Files, that book series is okay, but like it's not, it hasn't been done as well as it was done in Gargoyles before or since,
Mm-hmm.
in my mind, because they took magic and genuine like medieval era fantasy creatures and things and made it work
Shakespearean
so
references.
well. Yeah, it was
Yep.
well, and not just references. It felt Shakespearean
Mm-hmm.
in the tragedy and the pathos of the whole show, and it really managed to marry old and new in a way that
Mm-hmm.
didn't feel silly. It didn't feel contrived. It makes sense. Like I would love to see another like a continuation of that series, and I would say I'd love to see it in live action, but they'd ruin it.
Yeah, and the thing is with I'm trying not to go back to it, but the thing with and it's important for Batman. Why I say this, the thing with the Batman the animated series and Gargoyles is first of all the Batman the animated series walked so Gargoyles could run, and I just say
Mm-hmm.
that clearly they took so much from Batman for Gargoyles, which is great. Take from it, and Batman only got better. So I'm not saying that Batman walked and Gargoyles ran is that Gargoyles was better. I'm just saying that show wouldn't have happened without the success of Batman.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm gonna say that and like leave that there. But the thing with both of them is that the source material was taken seriously,
Mm-hmm.
very seriously, and like there's jokes, there's levity, but there is a darkness, a good darkness, because it's the darkness that you have to fight. It's not glorifying it. It's showing this is how evil is, and this is
Mm-hmm.
how good guys can fight it, even if they fight it at night. Um,
Right.
yeah, and like the mood, like the music of Gargoyles was just like Batman the Animated Series, where it was orchestral and it was well
Mm-hmm.
structured. And we have I'm not trying to go back into that because I'm really trying to make this podcast about this kind of stuff. But this is the kind of ideas that we poured into Kolga, which is going to be
Mm-hmm.
our second series that comes out later this year. Is how do you tell something kind of with colorful and cool, but with that darkness too, and aim it for
Mm-hmm.
maybe not kids, but not for anybody over 18 really, even though they'll still love it, that's the whole thing. And it's kids aren't stupid, and people like when things are taken seriously because
Mm-hmm.
we entered after this in the late 2000, early 2000, late 2000, we entered the age of non-seriousness. Like Teen Titans got turned into Teen Titans Go, Thundercats got turned into Thundercats Roar. Uh, I, I like,
Roar or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
I liked Adventure Time, but Adventure Time kind of spelled the downfall for a lot of this because everything was ripping that off and it wasn't serious. Even though it was serious, the shows that came after it removed all the serious parts.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a lot to say, I know, but
Well,
that's what happened
and
though.
yeah, and I will say too, one of the things that as a kid made me respond to Gargoyles the way I did, and I didn't have cable.
Me either.
All right, so like, um,
We had three channels.
I, yeah, and but Fox was one of them. I could watch Fox Kids. I get Fox 24 out of Charleston, I think,
Yep, 40,
as a
43
kid. But
too.
yeah, but like I do remember like a lot of the stuff that I watched because I didn't get a chance to just sit at home and watch TV as a kid. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was a like when I got home, most of this get your homework done. All right, then it's supper time. And then like by the nighttime, family watched TV, and most of those cartoons were off by that point.
Yep.
I would watch stuff on Saturday mornings, but all that to say, I had a lot of VHS tapes, and the Gargoyles, like the two-part series, like
Oh, the guts.
the
The
first
first arc is 5 episodes. The guts
right,
to
and
do
they
that.
released it like a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that on VHS, and I remember the coolest thing about that movie, other than the fact that it was in this big, oversized box and had painted artwork that looked amazing on the cover of it. It also came with there was a video board game. It had a
Yep,
board
I remember
game
that.
that you could play that was inside the box.
Yep.
And like I was a huge fan of a series called Nightmare. They were these video board games from the
Mm-hmm.
'90s that were just really
I remember
fun,
the commercials for those.
and it was so interactive to watch the movie and then go or the show that was made into a like a movie length feature and then to play the game. It was they did stuff with Gargoyles that like I'd never seen anybody do before.
Yep. And there's that
It was
whole.
just such a cool concept.
It was, and it was dark, like I said, but it wasn't. I don't know the word I'm looking. It wasn't cynical, and it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
scary. It wasn't like a lot of stuff just tries to be like subversive to kids. And when you
Mm-hmm.
watch Gargoyles, like, they're these beast things, but they have a code of honor, and they're more honorable than the business. That's the whole thing. Like Xanatos, the business guy that broke their curse, he's the bad guy. He's the modern man.
Mm-hmm.
He'll do anything. He's Machiavellian. In fact, spoiler alert: his assistant turns out to be Puck from the Shakespearean
Mm-hmm.
play, and Puck works for him, and Puck has the ability. I mean, he can do like Doctor Strange level stuff, but you never see it till the end. And but they're it's so weird seeing morals in a kids show.
Mm-hmm.
And like
Yeah,
yeah,
I hear you.
while I was rewatching it, it's like
And
Goliath always has a moral, even when he fails, and his anger gets
go
the
ahead.
best of him. You know, that's it.
And I don't know. We can edit this out if we need to. The video and audio keeps breaking up. Is it breaking up on your end?
It is not.
Okay, you might have to just edit this out. I just want to make sure that like none of this stuff is recording the way I'm hearing it because it'll start
Well, I hope
stuff.
not.
So maybe we'll just maybe write down a timestamp or something, and we can go back and look at it, make sure it, and just edit that out if we need to later.
Okay, now you're good.
All right, but yeah, I mean, I remember even things like down to like the McDonald's Happy Meal toys of Gargoyles being so much cooler than everything else. Like I remember there was a little thing. It was a stone, and if you hit the button on the bottom, it would spin and open
Yeah.
up, and
Yep.
it looked like it was turning into
Yeah.
Goliath.
It would spin and fall, so the statue beneath was underneath it. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it definitely dealt with good and evil, and then everything kind of in between too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there were what was the Demona?
Demona, great character, one of the
One of
best villains
such a
Disney ever made.
yeah, just incredible villain, scary and powerful. But there
Female.
was also very, very feminine, and also was able to. You got the sense that there was genuine love between her and Goliath as well.
Yeah,
Like the
and that's what made it
complexities
worse.
of their, yeah, the complexity of that relationship was something that you don't normally see in a cartoon.
Yeah.
And that goes back to what you were saying of the kids can't actually handle more mature, not vulgar, but more mature, more intelligent storytelling than we give them credit for sometimes.
Oh yeah, and Demona is one of the best. I hate to say Disney villains because I say Disney. Disney didn't create her. The creator did, but you know they're owned by Disney, or at least they were.
Exactly.
But wonderful character, wonderful villain because she's a lover that's spited, and I hate to say understandable, but she saw her entire clan destroyed, and
Hmm.
she hates humans because she literally saw what she thought was the destruction of everything. She thought her daughter was destroyed too. It turns out she wasn't, but even more so than that, this is how good writing used to be. Not only was it she was pseudo sympathetic, but the the whole reason that happened is because she betrayed the humans that were their
Hmm.
guardians to Vikings, and the Vikings were the ones that went further and destroyed their rookery and killed her family. So it is her
Right.
fault. So she hates herself and she hates humans, and she's just a miserable person. It's not that she's just sympathetic, but it's like she's also unrepentant, and it's also her fault. Like,
Hmm.
you know, the greatest villains people can imagine now is that some that are slightly understandable and slightly sympathetic, but what they did was kind of like Magneto. It's like, yeah, you're kind of a victim, but there's also parts that are your fault that you won't reconcile, and that's what really is a
Hmm.
villain, you know. And that goes all the way back to Kane. Let's not go there, but you know what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know that they did a good job of showing that she was she had her own agency and everything, but she was also being manipulated.
Hmm.
And you know that it just everything has layers to it. Even the police officer who is one of
Eliza.
the human, yeah,
Yeah.
Eliza, that's one of the human main characters, who was also one of those early cartoon crushes
Yep.
back in the
Very
day.
competent.
Uh,
Oh, with that,
yeah,
not to interrupt,
no, you
but
go with it.
her voice and Xanatos, of course, you know, two characters from voiced by Star Trek Next Generation.
Jonathan Frakes and
When you
who did her voice?
Diana Troy, whoever played her,
Yeah,
I forgot her name,
doggone it, Marina Sirtis.
maybe. But
Sounds right.
when you listen to the show Gargoyles, the audio sounds like adults talking. It's
Hmm.
controlled. It's kind of low
Hmm.
and spoken and kind of stoic, and kids
Hmm.
loved it. It's not SpongeBob screaming in your face. It's not,
Hmm.
you know, like modern shows. It's not like hyper, like everything's cranked up to 11, bright colors. Like no, it's a contemplative show, and that's what I wanted to talk about. Like going with X-Men at the time, Batman, Thundercats, GI Joe. Kids shows used to show adults doing things, and then at some point it became about showing children doing things. You see what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? That was my main gripe
Mm-hmm.
with, and I liked the show enough, but like when X Men Evolution came out, I was like, remember when the X Men were adults?
Right. Right.
Anyway, that's what you get what I'm saying.
Well, and to go back to the voice acting too, even the characters like some of the other gargoyles,
Hmm.
secondary gargoyle characters that are more, I guess, more comic relief type characters, they are not of the
Hmm.
they're not Patrick Star, they're not
Yeah.
goofy, silly characters. They're still they still sound like intelligent, like adult characters.
Yeah, like I said, even Broadway, who's like supposed to be like the big dumb one, he's not really dumb.
Right.
He's just kind of goofy and childish. But it's that childishness and that goofiness that almost cost his friend's life when he discharged her weapon and it ricocheted and hit her.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the whole thing. And then
Right.
he immediately turns violent and angry because he hates himself. And he goes on a
Right.
rampage, and Goliath's the only one that kind of calms him down, but he owns up to his mistake, and she lives and everything. And then they even show subtly in a couple episodes after that, anytime he sees a gun, he crushes it. But they don't say it. They don't. The kid,
Mm-hmm.
you would just get it. You see it. You know that's part of his character now.
Mm-hmm.
It's brilliant writing. It's unbelievably brilliant writing.
Yeah.
People don't understand how hard it is, and that's what we try to do for Kolga. And like I said, Kolga isn't directed at kids, but what we didn't want to do is make it vulgar. We wanted to do heavy themes
Mm-hmm.
and do it right. And people don't understand how hard that is because you write it like big and jagged, and you don't file it, but you say, okay, what's the best way to display that? And what you usually find is that the best way is usually the way that younger people can understand.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's much harder to write for that age group, which is why I applaud those kind of shows and that kind of media.
Well, and I think some of that, you and I grew up in the '80s and the '90s, as as probably not as well, probably not as well protected as we probably should have been in terms of what media we were exposed to. But like as a kid, I grew up watching things like RoboCop, Terminator, Cobra, and
Oh man,
Rambo, and
Cobra.
all of the Stallone and Schwarzenegger type movies. I grew up when I went out in the yard and played, and I pretended to be something.
Hmm.
It was usually one of those adult male
Yeah, what she
characters.
wanted to eventually be. Yeah.
Right. It was that idea of I want to grow up to be that.
Hmm.
And it's interesting, if I look back, I had obviously I had a ton of action figure type toys, and a lot of them were comic book character toys, and I played with those. But when I pretended, like when I wasn't playing with an action figure, but when I was pretending to be something, it was always drawing from that well of adult
Hmm.
male characters that I was like, I wish I could be strong like this character, or I wish I could be, noble like that character, and those were the things that appealed to me.
Yeah.
And you can argue one way or the other about whether or not I should have been exposed to those things as a kid or not, but the reality is that most of what I drew inspiration from as a kid, that's what it was.
Yeah. There was a standard that you aspired to be.
Right.
Yeah. And
And I didn't grow up. You and I didn't grow up necessarily in the Ben 10 era.
yeah, and I mean,
You
I
know.
enjoyed that show for what it was as long as I watched it, but it was still very kid focused. They didn't have a family. They had a grandpa, and he was great,
Mm-hmm.
but he wasn't as competent or as powerful as Ben was. Ben did the heavy lifting.
Exactly.
They assisted.
Exactly.
They took a secondary role.
Mm-hmm.
Like the thing with the X Men is there's no one badder than Professor X.
Yeah.
A bald professor in a wheelchair is the strongest person there. and he keeps the order. You know.
Well, I mean, even and if you want to take that trope and go even further back with it, you think about things like, I know you and I were talking about Lord of the Rings earlier this week.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the hobbits may as well be children,
Yeah.
essentially, in the way they're written and the way that they're portrayed. The characters that are in the greatest role of control are who? Gandalf, Aragorn, those kinds of characters. Theoden.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the ones that, you really feel like the hobbits are children who are learning from the adults that they're looking
Well,
up to, even in those stories.
and the great spin with that though is by the end, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's the hobbits that displayed the greatest valor because they learned to not make those same mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
It's a
It's a
generational
journey,
story.
right? And that's the journey of maturity. Not to get too heavy on this, but that's the journey of childhood to adulthood, is learning how to not be selfish,
Yeah.
how to not be so focused on, well, I hope I get all of my meals today, and I really miss my comfortable stuff that I like, and I really do hope that I can get attention and all these things,
Mm-hmm.
to the point of, okay, there's something important and hard that has to be done, and I'm gonna be the one that does it.
Yeah, and I don't want, like I said, I don't want to go too much into the woods because we're planning a very large Lord of the Rings
Right,
meeting.
right.
But let's go with that theme, though. That theme is there because let's take Theoden and Aragorn.
Mm-hmm.
Aragorn is older than Theoden by like 20 years. He was fighting in
Mm-hmm.
wars when Theoden was a child, but he doesn't age the same way. So by the time of the two towers, Aragorn's like almost 90, and Theoden's in his 60s, something like that.
Which, to be fair, is something that the movies didn't do a very good job of
Yeah,
explaining
the
or
extended
addressing.
the extended edition did. Yeah,
Right.
but Aragorn's wisdom comes into play, but also his youth comes into play. He can see different things. He can see different ways to do things, and Theoden's pretty hard set. But at the end of the day, Theoden has accepted, because of his age and his actual age, and he has accepted that he's
Mm-hmm.
a king and he's responsible. Aragorn still refuses at that point to become king. And there's that clash.
Mm-hmm.
It shows that the young have something to learn from the old, and the old have something to learn from the young, of course. But most importantly, the young have something to learn from the old, and that is completely gone out of our culture. That the young have something to learn from the old because we're under a cultural revolution, literally.
Right. Well, and to bring that back around to what we were discussing with Gargoyles and with Batman the Animated Series, Gargoyles in particular doesn't have any child or even really teen-aged
Not
characters.
for like 3 seasons. You're right.
And then when you look at even the Batman the Animated Series, yes, there's a Robin, but it's a college-age Robin.
It's Dick Grayson.
Yeah, and I think that dynamic worked really well for all of the reasons that we were just talking about, of like, you do not, the idea that you absolutely have to have a child proxy character to tell a story to children, that's just a farce, man.
Mm-hmm.
They do not have to have a proxy in the story to be drawn in.
Well, I know Thundercats had the Wileys. They had Wily Kit and Wily Cat, who
Yeah.
weren't bad. They were actually kind of cool because they were doing things. Um,
Hmm.
G.I. Joe didn't have any, I don't think. He-Man.
They
Mm,
He-Man didn't really have any. Um, and even Wily, Wily Cat, though, the cat kids, they weren't really the leads
yeah,
in that
yeah,
series either.
yeah. But when they did, they were doing things with the adults and
Hmm.
learning from them and listening to them
Hmm.
and stuff. And
Hmm.
their role made the adults cooler. That's the whole
Right. So
thing.
like, so for when it comes to Biophile Kolga,
Yeah.
which is again the series we're going to be putting out after
Hmm.
Apollyon 20XX drops, we have an interesting approach to like our characters with age. Specifically, the title character is essentially an elderly woman who has lived her entire life, and she's been given a young body again.
Hmm.
And then we have a teenage character, who is her ward, and those are our two main characters for that series. In writing the series, which has been more your end of things. And then we've discussed all the story beats and the world and all together. But in writing the series, like how does age affect the way you write Kolga and the way you write the character of June?
Kolga is actually easier to write because she's so world weary and not ready for death, but ready to not have to deal with life anymore. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's easy to write because the average person feels that once you pass 30. And I mean that's a joke, but it's kind of true. What's more fun is writing June because you're writing someone who doesn't know everything, who is
And
super.
hasn't had all the optimism beaten out of her yet.
Yeah, but it's easy to write a cynical preteen, and that's what.
Yeah.
And when you see June, um, she's not that, and she's actively
Mm-hmm.
striving to not be that because she has a torrid past in history too, and I hate to say it, but growing up, we all knew those kids, or you knew people like
Yep.
that, particularly girls. You knew ones that, especially, I mean, I grew up in the emo phase. Like I was like 20 whenever emo hit or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
that didn't change anything about people. It just kind of revealed things that always existed. And it's so
Right.
easy. Here's a my wife gets on me, but she admitted it. What sets me off with there's different pet peeves I have with characters like male and female, right? But a TV show or movie, whenever a female character starts talking in a vocal fry, you know it's bad writing. Whenever they start like this, that's the tone
Mm-hmm.
they take to deliver bad lines about how hard their life is.
Mm-hmm.
And one example of that is Anne Hathaway's Catwoman. Whenever she's talking about how Bruce is poor, but he didn't lose his house or whatever. And I'm not trying to start a thing here, but for real, the next time you watch a show, especially a drama or a movie, and a female character is talking in a vocal fry, you just know that's such a I hate to say it, but that's such a modern, whiny, pathetic writing style.
It's low hanging fruit.
It
It's an
is.
easy way, and it's cheap.
Yeah.
And I'd much rather see because you brought it up, so let's go there. We all grew up knowing the girls who went through absolute hell at home,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe that we all grew up with girls who had been mistreated, who had been probably, you know, molested in some ways, or we knew the
Or
girls that
worse. Yeah.
had, or worse, we knew those girls, but those were also the toughest chicks.
Mm-hmm.
Like they didn't walk around. At least the ones that I knew, they didn't walk around and throw victim cards all the time. They were tough, and maybe they were hard because that was self defense, and I know that was part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But most of them also had most of those girls were the ones that had a sick sense of humor.
Well, and I'll say
Like they didn't
this.
let it ruin
I'll
them.
say this not to derail it, but there were dudes just like that too. You just didn't know about it.
Oh yeah, of
Nobody did.
course, of course,
Yeah, nobody knew
yeah, of
about it.
course.
But yeah, I hate to say it, but the vocal fry delivery is
Trauma.
yeah, and it's not Valley Girl. It's like it's but yeah, it's that it's the modern idea of trauma. It's uh, the alcoholic reporter stereotype chick or something like that. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
All that to
Right.
say, that's what June isn't. It would be so easy to write that, and June is Kolga's ward. But there's literally in this first volume an issue where she wakes up from a nightmare and chooses to smile in the mirror. And part of it, of course, is the cynical hiding it or running from it. But most of it is, no, this is what you do. You choose not to let this control your day. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I didn't mean to like get off in the symbolism of our own work, but it's like, but I feel like such a jerk saying this. and maybe it's men that did it, but female characters are so badly written, and so are male characters. And like, oh, let's go to an example of that, like the Wednesday show. Every male character in that show is so badly written, and the same character, you can pull their faces off and put it on another person. I genuinely, like, the three main dudes, I forgot who was who, and it's because they are reactive to her.
Right.
And she doesn't do it. They don't do it with her, which is probably the Tim Burton influence. Wednesday is still dry humored for the most part, but there's still glimpses of that vocal fry stuff. There's still glimpses of that modern, I guess I would call it, this is how old I am, like girl interrupted fetish. Like that's how old I am. This is a girl interrupted.
And I didn't watch that. I didn't watch that show.
Not bad.
But no, I know exactly. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean though. And it's one of those things, and maybe it's just the way that women or get portrayed in a lot of different sources of media. It just kind of starts. That's where it ends. But like, I was watching an old movie the other week. I watched an old John Wayne movie called Red River, which is phenomenal. But there's a girl in that movie that, like, she's in the middle of this big attack with the Native Americans, and there's all these guns are going off and arrows are flying, and she gets shot in the shoulder with an arrow. And like she takes it like an absolute boss.
Because you had
and like I just remember like yeah, it took me out of the movie in a good way, in that like I just had to appreciate the way that they handled her character. Like, she doesn't just and faint. Like she took it like an absolute boss. And like, even when it comes time when the fighting's over and they come and they have to pull it out and all, she's so tough. I'm like, man, we need more of this.
Well, it's not Captain Marvel either. It's not.
Right.
It's not.
Yeah,
it's not taking 20 arrows and then somehow shooting the bow better than they do back at them.
Because of her past and her trauma.
Yeah, it's not. I don't know. We should do a whole podcast on the vocal fry. The best thing I can think is go watch that scene where Bruce Wayne in Dark Knight Rises goes and talks to Catwoman after he's broke, and just Anne Hathaway's delivery of that is. First of all, I don't like her as an actress, but it's a really bad delivery. But it's the only way to do that, so I'm not going to fault her for it, because like that lines, especially when she goes, the rich don't even go broke like the rest of us. And the way she delivers, it's already a bad line, and the way she delivers it is that vocal fry,
the whiniest possible.
Yeah, but there are entire characters in shows that do that, and what I wanted to do with June is not that.
Yeah, not build a whole character sheerly out of pettiness.
Yeah.
just pettiness given a voice.
But that's the thing, going back to Gargoyles, is Eliza is tough, but she's feminine. And even when one of her best friends shoots her by accident, she forgives him and doesn't mention it again. And it's like, man, you won't see that ever. That's,
right.
And it's continuity. She has to recover. She has to, like, she's on crutches the next episode, still fighting crime and stuff. But I don't know, I didn't mean to go on a rabbit trail, but like, I can't praise that show enough. I know in like season 3 it gets to like some of the Avalon stuff and it gets a little bit weirder, but it makes sense in the show.
Yeah, I don't think it ever fully jumps the shark, and it is still a kid's show.
Yeah.
So like, I'll forgive it some of that. But there's a reason why that show has an enduring fan base and is finding new fans. Like, that show being on Disney Plus is one of the things that, like, everybody was so excited to see that show pop up on Disney Plus and watch it again. And I would love to see the numbers and the statistics. Like, I wonder how much more Gargoyles has been watched than the Book of Boba Fett or Miss Marvel. Because I guarantee you, it's gotten more watches than She-Hulk or any of those things have. And it's because it's still, it holds up and it's so good, and like they can still release figures and people are clamoring
Dude,
to collect them.
You showed me the Steel Clan one. I'm not gonna buy that one. I'm gonna wait for the red one, which is Xanados and the armor controlling it, because I've always liked that one. But while I was searching that, I saw Thylog, who I forgot existed, who was a Goliath clone that has Xanados's memories or whatever, and he's black with the white hair. I bought him on the spot. Because I was like, dude, they got
he's such a cool looking thing.
I had forgot about him. I had forgotten that he existed, and then I saw Demona. I'm probably going to buy Demona my next paycheck, because I was like, man, she's one of the greatest media villains I've ever seen. Like, she's, I don't know, I could do
she's awesome.
I could do an entire video on Demona.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah. If you want,
and that's what we want to give is,
if you want to learn female villain writing 101, watch Gargoyles.
Yeah, go there. Well, see, and that not just female villains, but female heroes too, because Eliza is such an awesome character, and that's how you take a character of like, because she's Latina as well, right?
I think she's half Latina and half black, because her dad was, I think her
you might be right.
Was black.
You might be right.
Yeah, and her mom was Latina, I think.
And like they let her have those aspects of her character without having to parade it and say that this is the only thing you should look at. Look how bold we are.
Well, it wasn't even about a woman. Like, she's just a competent cop.
Right, and that's how you do actual inclusion.
You just do it
without anything else is pandering. But yeah, like to go back to what you were saying about female characters, like that's what we're hoping to do with Kolga, is to give you female villains and female characters that are not pandering, that are not the lowest common denominator of that stuff.
Well, it's fun to do now because there's so many bad ones. Like when we first started, the book we did, the first book, which is a novel, which we'll be releasing soon. It's been done, guys. It's been done and edited. It's ready to go. That follows Garo, who's a boy, who's a preteen boy, but we started writing such great female characters in it. Not to pat ourselves on the back. It's like, well, this seems really fun, because like when I was writing that novel, I realized in the past 20 years. Even female writers haven't written good female characters. Or multifaceted ones. And it was through making Bosma and Mixie, though, like that's where I really got inspired. Like, let's do some more female characters. In Apollyon, the first book coming out, guys, is going to be half and half. Like the ensemble is more like the X-Men, but Kolga is predominantly female in a good way. And most of the villains are female too, because women can be, hey, shocker, women can be terrible too.
Well, and to give a glimpse into the lore of things, what a recurring theme in all of the Godfrey universe stuff, at least all the stuff after Apollyon 20XX, is clans of witches. The witch clans, and that's something that is built into the DNA of the Godfrey universe, and that's a big part of where these characters get their power from and what they have to dip into to access that power, and what they have to give up of themselves to access that power.
Yeah, it comes with a cost.
That's a big part of what our characters in Kolga are dealing with, and not to get too overblown with it, but like, that's part of the curse of Eden, is that, birthing anything new is going to be a thing of sorrow. A woman's going to have to taste sorrow and pain to birth anything. And that's part of what's built into the anatomy of our world. And, that's why our women they're very powerful, but they've also sacrificed so much for that power. And some of them have done so heavily to their detriment and to the detriment of the world around them.
and there's a reason that it has to be females for that. We get into that,
Yeah, absolutely.
and there are male witches by the end of it, and that's because some things were changed and some leadership changed, and we'll get into that later. But it's while the rest of the world, for some reason, is going into chaotic, amorphous soup. I want to talk about reality and, and differences between of sexes that just exist, like for good or bad, they're just there. And
Hmm.
explore the good and explore the bad, and that doesn't define characters. You know, your genitalia doesn't define who you are, but it's a major part of you. And
Hmm.
there's no getting around that. Like all of all of religion, all of philosophy up until postmodernism, basically, has dealt with this because it's just a reality, and it's dealt with it significantly. Like I've already talked about this, but I mean, I witnessed the birth of my second child. Like I was there, and of course, I didn't give the birth, but I saw in that moment. I was like, I got why pagans worship the divine feminine. Like it clicked. I was
Hmm.
like, because women or mothers, they reach a point where if you're giving birth naturally, it's just you versus death, basically. And it's
Hmm.
painful and it's terrifying, and it's like you've got to do this. This is you're the only one. You can have 300 doctors around you holding your hand, or an entire village like back in the day. You're the only one that can do it. And I
Hmm.
was like, man, I get it. And it made me mad that's crapped on so much, particularly
Yeah,
motherhood. Like it's like you, it's
the
a
power of that,
yeah, and
like the
it's a
that's
horrible thing to
yeah,
take that from a woman. And I get some
yeah.
people, some women can't. I get it, and I'm not saying they're lesser. I don't care none of that. But we live in a culture that would deny men their manhood and women their womanhood. And I mean, after witnessing that, I'm like, man, what a absolutely horrific thing to do to people is
Hmm.
to deny them that.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, not to go off on the, but yeah, gargoyles to get bring us back in town, back around. We're not trying to rip off gargoyles, but we have the liberty of growing up and being influenced by good writing. And
Hmm.
it's not too late. Like if you're a young writer, even if you're an old writer, I would say surround yourself with good things and good examples like that. And gargoyles,
Well, and I
I
think
don't know, I
that,
can't think of a better
from
one.
well, and from an artistic standpoint, aesthetically, you're going to see a lot of the dark shadows and the purples and
Mm-hmm.
greens and reds and stuff that are so prevalent in the Gargoyle show that makes that show look so great. There's a lot of that that's going to be in Kolga.
It's very muted.
Yeah, that color palette.
Yeah.
Yeah, that color palette is definitely going to be something that I think people will see in Kolga and hopefully enjoy.
Mm-hmm. And I like being able to do that and tell that without going over the edge because it's so easy to show absolute gore or profanity or like gratuitous sexual stuff, and it's so much better, so much more rewarding to pull back on that. And I'll just say that I
Hmm.
don't care if there's indie comic guys listening to this. Like, man, if when you pull back and you force yourself to convey things better, it's just so
Hmm.
much more rewarding. And some people sling cheesecake, that's fine. Or we don't serve that. We serve steak.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to drag it on too long because I'll talk like 3 hours on this, and we're saving that for the Lord of the Rings. So, but um, yeah, I mean, we can pimp our stuff, go ahead and do all that. But if you like gargoyles, you'll like Kolga. That's what I'll say. So,
And if you haven't watched Gargoyles, it's worth it's worth actually signing up for Disney Plus just to watch Gargoyles,
yeah,
and then the rest of it is can take it or leave it. But man, if you've never seen Gargoyles, do yourself a favor while it's still available and you can still actually watch it.
oh yeah, I'm gonna buy it on DVD and Blu-ray after this. After I rewatch it again.
It's the only yeah, just so you can have it so they can't take it from you later.
Yeah, but
When they realize it's good, they'll try to take it from you or ruin it.
I'm sure they once they realize that it's promoting like cops as good guys, they'll get rid of it.
They preyed on that show.
That they did, and that's what surprised me was after she got shot, the police commissioner or somebody's like, this like basically said something like, "The city's gonna know you don't attack cops." Like, I was like, jeez, because they thought a criminal had done it, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're getting this guy." Like, but yeah, Polygon 20XX is coming out soon, guys, and that's an event. That's not just a book. It's a book that is the length of 6 issues, and it's only volume 1 of probably 6 volumes, which is a lot. But it's going to have podcasts, short films. My gosh, we already had the Lamentations you guys can read, which is 80 pages of awesome stuff that's in the world, and then we're going to have the Revelations coming out. That's even more cool stuff to go with it. So I don't know, man. We're doing something really cool in comics I don't think can be matched. Despite the fact that we can't.
So like and subscribe, follow us, get on the mailing list.
Despite the fact that we can't get our technical stuff to work tonight, so we're using magic spell table. But yeah, go to GodFoUniverse.com, sign up for the mailing list, all this stuff. Get ready for Apollyon, and I don't know, man. Let's take you on this ride, because it's gonna be better than anything in indie or mainstream comics. It's bigger events than that. So, you got anything you want to close off with, Josh?
Not particularly. Just enjoyed the talk, and yeah, just encourage people, if you haven't checked out Gargoyles, it's worth checking out. It's something that holds up better than you remember it holding up.
It's like
a lot of times it's disappointing to go back. Better than I hold up. But no, a lot of times you remember a show as being like really great, and then you go back and watch it as an adult, and you're like, oh, why did I like this? And you're not going to have that experience with Gargoyles.
No.
You're going to like it more now.
Yeah. There was a time when Western animation gave anime a run for its money.
Yeah.
At least
it was
story.
A brief period.
Yeah. All right, guys. We'll talk with you later.
Peace.